This is Bucket Talk, a weekly podcast for people who work in the trades and construction that aren't just trying to survive, but have the ambition and desire to thrive. The opportunity in the trades and construction is absolutely ridiculous right now. So if you're hungry, it's time to eat. We discuss what it takes to rise from the bottom to the top with people who are well on their way and roll up their sleeves every single day.
So today we have Randy Nessman, Master Pipe Layer, on this episode of Bucket Talk. Randy, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So Randy, you're a farmer. You deal with drainage out in the farming community, also known as drain tiles, and then firefighter. I really want to get into a day in the life of what you do, and I'm super excited for you to be on. So, honestly, where you're based out of and what you do and how you got there.
So I guess so I'm from Kensington, Minnesota, little town, 300 people, west central Minnesota. Born and raised dairy farmer, and then I would have been about 18 years old when we quit the dairy farm. So moved on from that to a agronomy center, spraying, fertilizer, chemical, custom harvesting. Did that a few years, then bounced right into grain bin stuff. Sold and serviced grain dryers, grain bins, millwright, building the grain legs, all of that. And about that same time, I suppose I was 19 and I joined the fire department. So
so I just recently got into the farming community. It's always been something that I wanted to do. I got into livestock. I deal with horses, pigs, chickens, ducks, all that stuff, right? Nice. And but for me, the transition from being dealing with horses to dealing with cattle. A buddy of mine down the street deals with cattle and beef steers and what have you. And I mean, for you to make those transitions, like you're going from, it's all considered farming or agriculture, if you will, but
correct. Yep.
They're very different jobs. How do you adapt from one to the other? I mean, is it just your upbringing, or was it just on the job training? Like, talk me through that transition.
I'd say all of it. When we were still dairy farming, so I would have been 16, 17 years old. I was helping this agronomy center. As soon as I was 16 years old, I would get a temporary CDL so I could drive Class B, which would be like a tandem straight truck, hauling fertilizer, running grain cart. I think I started running a combine when I was 19, and that was just kind of on the side. I've never been able to be stuck doing one thing for too long, so I'd like to do them extra things. So then, when we quit dairy farming, I just moved right into this full time. And then the grain bin thing, it was a buddy of mine, started a business selling soak-up grain dryers, grain bins, grain dryers. Same deal there. We get off work early. I'd go help him. We'd deliver materials. I'd help him pour some cement on weekends, concrete, things like that. When I decided to finally make that transition, I'd already been working for the guy for a couple of years. So I just slid into that. And then through that guy is how I ended up where I am now. Same type of deal.
So that's an interesting point. So like, you have your day job, and then outside of that, you take a little extra time out of your day to help your neighbor. You learn another skill. I guess I could say that, as I'm in the horse world, I'm learning about livestock fencing and finishing beef and all that stuff. So it's a longer process because you're only devoting 2 or 3 hours, maybe a week. It could be a little bit more than that, but so it's a longer process. But you're actually being immersed into that versus like coming into it cold. So
right, it was never like walking into a job like, what am I doing here today? It was always hey, you've already been doing this, and just kind of move into that. But I've always kind of been that way. Back when I was 14 years old, if I had a spare half a day on the farm in the summer, I had 2 or 3 other neighboring farmers I'd go throw hay bales for. Like I always
Yeah.
like to be doing something different with different people. It was all agriculture based, but
Yeah, it's interesting up here too. Like a lot of guys will they'll have livestock, but a way to reduce costs is by, you know, working with your neighbor on haying their fields. So they're like, hey, you know what, you got this large piece of property. I'm gonna hay it. I'll come over, I'll hay, bundle, and remove it for you. You don't have to do anything, but obviously it'll keep your costs down. So a lot of the farmers up in our area do their own haying on other people's parcels, which is pretty unique. So they're not actually using their own. They're not buying their own property and using their own property. They're actually helping a neighbor out get rid of or maintaining that property and then benefiting from it in that way.
sure, yep. And we're from a pretty desolate area. I mean, everybody knows everybody, so it's not like I'm walking into this agronomy center not knowing anybody. You know, they'd been doing the
Yeah.
agronomy stuff on our side, and so it's you know, we know everybody that we're moving around through.
So if you don't mind me asking, and you know, it's one of the. So I have goats. My wife wanted to. We have dairy goats, and so she wanted to get into the milking. Our flock is still young, so we're working on that. And but why did you get out of the dairy industry? Was that just like, you know, mom and pop decided to retire, and then it was just, you know, what's next in life, or was it just not working out for anybody?
Kind of, yeah. So to back up even furthermore, so we'd milked 80 cows in a tie stall barn up until 96. 96,
Okay.
we'd moved to we built a 250 cow a parlor system, so double six, so 12 cows at a time in a parlor. And right that 96, prices plummeted. Milk was well below uh, our margins or our cost per day, cost per cow price.
Yep.
And we fought that on until about '02, and then in 2002 we wrapped it up. So we went out on our own terms, but it wasn't very far from not being our own terms. So that's kind of
So
what made that move.
what's interesting is I'm like a late 90s kid, early 2000s kid. And one of the biggest things that we had going during that time was the Got Milk commercials. Was that a representation of how um the dairy farm industry was going? That like, hey, we needed to draw a light to this. You know, dairy farmers aren't doing well. What was kind of the push there? I mean, it seems like the timing lined up, right?
Right. Yeah. And I don't, you know, I was younger then and didn't get as much into the finance
Yeah.
side of things, but I know if I remember right, milk had dipped down around that 10, $11 per hundredweight, and at that time, like cost per production was probably 13, 14, somewhere in there. And
Yep.
I know in like 2001, 2000, somewhere in there, it climbed for a little bit, like almost to where you had some hope, and then they dropped again, and they maybe even started coming up again at that point. But at that point, we were in such a hole. It's kind of that, you know, Dad kind of come to us. You know, my older brother had already moved on, doing mechanic, works for John Deere as a mechanic,
Yeah.
and kind of, well, what do you guys want to do? Is it worth the fight? And we were both at that time. Uh, we kind of had enough of the cows too, so that was kind of the deciding factor, I guess.
So, uh, would you say A, it's rebounded, and then B, do you think that it's more of a niche market now? Like, so there was that monoculture mass producing, um, you know, way of doing farming, right? So like you had hundreds of head of cattle, to milk, right? And then, you know, you're mass producing, so obviously your margins are slimmer, right? Because people are buying it bulk. Do you think that like shifting to like a niche market that they have nowadays, like you see it with like especially cattle, beef products and what have you, where you know people are buying now half cows or quarter cows and they're overpaying per steak, you know what I mean, versus um you know, that mass production like hamburger and you know, what have you.
Right.
So I don't
There,
know. Shed a little light on that.
so I know there's definitely a few dairies that have that niche market going on. I'm
Hmm.
trying to think a couple off the top of my head that produce their own milk and truck their own milk out, and I think do really well at that. Also, the dairies now have gone to 5,000 cow, 10,000 cow,
Yeah.
and more, and that just I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's just the way progression works. But a 10,000 cow dairy can have a cost of production of I'm just throwing numbers, $12.
Yeah.
Where a 250 cow dairy would have that cost of production would be like $14. So in
Yeah.
milk's $13, that 250 guy's not hacking it, and that
Yeah.
10,000 guy is doing good. I think that's probably more the way that went, and that's sort of kind of going that way in farming in general.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple of dairies up in our area that have now, obviously milked, pasteurized, and then bottled and delivered to people's houses. So that they're now getting this service, they're getting that organic, that high class, what have you, and it's like it's cool to see them adapting with the times. Like how is a mom and pop operation that's been in business for hundreds of years? How do they survive against the Hoods, the Oakhurst, the really large, you know, large producing dairies out there? And then again, I deal in hay and grain and all that stuff. And I mean, there's years where we have hay shortages, so now you have malnourished animals, and I don't know. It's there's just so much to it than just having the cows and milking them and then producing it. There's way more on the other side that that is out of our control.
Right. Yeah. And as far as like the small dairy that's pasteurizing and bottling their own milk and sending it out, they can charge a premium for that. And if the consumer wants to buy that, if the consumer wants to spend more money on that milk so that they know what cow that came from or the actual dairy
Yeah,
came from, then great. If that's what the consumer wants, that's what the consumer is going to get. But then you do have these other guys that can produce cheap, good milk,
yeah,
on that side of it also.
yeah. No, I mean I mean you see it with eggs now. I mean eggs are through the roof, and now you got these beautifully packaged, organic, cage free, everything, and yeah, I think it's just smaller operations trying to jockey their way to stay in business, to be honest with you.
Right. And we are now newly chicken farmers. I should say my wife is a newly chicken farmer. So she's been threatening me about chickens for quite a while. And
Yeah.
about 6 weeks ago, we had a 3 a.m. house fire during a blizzard. So she's nervous that I was out on the roads, heading there. And so she's sitting awake at 3, 4 in the morning and lo and behold, ordered 20 baby chickens. So a week later, these 1 day old chickens show up like, the hell are we going to put these? I mean, we got it was 7 below zero this morning. And so we've got them living in the garage right now. Turn the heat up in the garage and hopefully one day we melt here and can get them outside. But
Yeah, I mean, I got 40 or 50 chickens now, and you know, it's been interesting because we had a broody hen that was laying on some eggs. They weren't viable, they weren't fertilized, but she was killing herself to do it. So I was like, just take the eggs away and let's see what happens. Come to find out, I come home and my wife went to Tractor Supply and bought like 12 chicks and put them in there. So the mother took to them, and I'm like, great. Now we have
now we
more
have
chickens.
right. Yes. Currently, my wife, she found on Facebook Marketplace, whatever it is,
Yeah.
somebody was remodeling their house and had a chandelier for sale, like
Yeah.
$20. So she's picking up a chandelier to put in her chicken house, the chicken coop. So she she's gonna be one of these crazy chicken ladies who's gonna put chicken pictures in her chicken coop with a
Yep.
chandelier and I guess have at it.
I mean, it's good. I actually don't mind it. The only thing I have that is constantly a problem is I always have a rooster problem. Um, we just have too many roosters. Obviously you got to call the herd, if you will.
Right.
But it's like the roosters are fine until they're not fine, right? And then all of a sudden they wreak havoc, and and so we're at that point now where we have to take down a few roosters. But yeah, it's been good. I mean, we got a couple of silkies, which are um, they're like these bell bottomed, really
Oh, yep.
fluffy chickens, and my wife loves them, and I don't know, they're obnoxious. But what's funny is I don't know which, because I'm like the worst farmer. Um, I get green eggs now. They're like a light blue green egg. I'm sure somebody will call me out on what breed it is, but it's funny because my son will only eat those eggs. So we have brown, we have white, we have everything, but he only wants to have green eggs for breakfast, and I'm like,
So
so
I think the green eggs come from, she calls them Easter eggers, because she ordered
okay,
10 of these Easter eggers that are supposed to give the blue, the green, whatever eggs,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then 10, I don't know, they're yellow, whatever
yeah.
whatever a yellow chicken is.
Yeah, so that's yeah, the yellow chicks that I had were straight out of Tractor Supply. They were and they end up being like a nice white, and they actually look pretty uniform versus like we got some from a breeder that they all kind of look different and have great coloring, but the ones from Tractor Supply were really like they almost feel commercialized because they
Yeah.
all look the same.
Yep. Right.
So I'm sure that breeding is streamlined. Um, but yeah, it's been quite the journey. I got my pig Waylon right now. He's trying to figure out how to mate with the three sows that I have, and he's coming at it from the side, and we're dying laughing. I'm like, hey, you gotta try a little bit harder, buddy. So,
you have to
but
you have to introduce him to the internet. Maybe you can
yeah.
help him out a little there.
Well, it's funny because I had them separated for a while because they were, I think for a male it's 18 months, and for a female it's a little bit longer than that before you can start breeding them. So we just got to the point now where we've hit those timelines, and we're not actively trying to breed them. We're just throwing them in there and seeing what happens, and reaping the, I don't know,
Sure.
just
Yeah.
dealing with the repercussions after that. But yeah, no, it's been wonderful. A lot of life, a lot of death on the farm. My kids are young, 6 and 8, and it's been one hell of a wild ride, and so that's been interesting. But I'd love to get into, so right now for me it's mud season. I have pastures that are absolutely destroyed. I got pooling, I personally have culverts, which they call swales up here. I'm doing everything I can for water mitigation. But then I happened upon your channel, and you have drainage tiles. I was like super jealous of like all the stuff that you do. So walk us through like pasture drainage and some of the stuff you do. And a lot of it's temporary too, correct?
Some of it is, yeah, yep,
Yeah.
kind of depending on what we're doing. So we don't get into a lot of pasture drainage.
Okay.
Yep, we're pretty much row crop area is primarily what we work
Yep.
in. But it's really the same. I mean, water runs downhill, and certain soil types release the water better than other soil types, and that's kind of what we do. We design through all that. So right now we are still full blown winter. Two
Yep.
years ago we were tiling ready. We typically would start pretty early in April. This year, obviously, it's going to be a little bit later than that. But um, but all winter long, I pretty much sit on the computer and do all my design work in the winter. We have lidar, which is flown over. It basically lasers come down, gives you a topography of the land. So
Yep.
I have the topography from all of our area. We do all the design work in the winter, do all the selling. Springtime we start tiling a little bit, get into farming, put the crop in. All summer long we're working in the crop, doing main, some deep stuff, small projects, and then after harvest, then we go back and do the more pattern tile we call the grid tiling. Um, so our area we're the prairie pothole area. So the glaciers came through, and we have our land is like a golf ball. Basically, you have a
Yep.
hill, and the top of the hill will be all these dimples. So 15 years ago, uh, we were more kind of hitting those potholes, run a line here, run a line there. And now we've moved way more into the pattern style where depending on your soil types, anywhere from every 25 feet all the way up to about 65, 70 feet wide, we basically grid tile, this field. So you have a main runs into an outlet, all your laterals, sub mains come into that main. Again, water runs downhill. Start at the bottom, work your way up. So
So now you use it for drainage, obviously, but do you use it for re-irrigation as well, or no?
we don't, very, very little in our area. We sit in too much elevation.
Yep.
So the guys that'll use it for both the drainage and irrigation. So every 2 foot in elevation drop, they have a control structure. So basically they have this whole system that'll drain itself out, and then they can add water at the top end, and then every 2 feet that control structure will hold that water. So then you
Okay.
basically stair step your project. And we sit in. I mean, a lot of our projects, I'll have 30 feet, 30, 40 feet of fall, across a quarter, across a half mile.
Wow.
We have big hills, then we flatten out, and then a hill and flat, and so we just sit in a little too much elevation for that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting because we're fortunate up here, but there are areas you go out towards California and what have you, and farmers are getting in trouble for retaining water, rainwater, and what
Right.
have you. Growing up, I thought that if you can catch the water, it's yours, but little did I know that you can't.
Right.
Because it affects everybody downhill. I don't really have a position on it. I don't know too much about it. So, but that is interesting that like any water runoff isn't technically owned by you just because it falls on your property.
Right.
So
See, we're
I don't,
kind of we're the other end of that, so we can't get rid of
yeah,
our water. So then you have everyone fighting below you. They don't want that water.
yeah,
It's like the old saying, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And that goes whether you want the water, you don't want the water. We deal with that all the time, and we do a fair amount of we call them equip projects. They're federally funded projects. WASCOB is the other one that people know them as, water and sediment control basins.
yep,
So we have that elevation. So we have these large watersheds. I mean, all the way down to nothing to 160 acre watershed that runs across this field that has 30, 40 feet of fall. So we come in with it's all, when we do those, it's all engineered by the NRCS, Natural
okay,
Conservation. So they'll engineer it all, put it in, you bring the pipes in, we build dams or dikes, either farmable ones or non-farmable. So the farmable ones, we just keep bringing in dirt until it's sloped enough where we can farm over it, without it being too steep. And it's all designed so that they'll design it for like 250-year storms. So not a 100-year storm, but 250-year storms back to back. So then, so they'll set it up for say an 8-inch rain, in 36 hours. And then this project's designed that it'll hold that water for 36 hours, and then it'll allow it to go down slowly so that, fast moving water is what causes the erosion. So if we could fill that up here, and, we'll have 6, 7, 4, 5, whatever amount of dams where we're holding all this water back, and then all those ponds will draw down the same time, and then they'll all go empty at that same time. And therefore it allows the dirt to settle out, all your nutrients, your sediments, everything settles out. And then you got, the clean water going out through a pipe rather than just wash it across top of the ground. So we get into usually 3 or 4 of those projects a year too. And then
no, I was gonna say that there's a reason why you're called master pipe layer, because there's it's a well earned title based on the amount of work you've done with drainage and irrigation.
Yeah, and there's definitely, I mean, guys in our area that do, way more than we do. The full-time guys, that's all they do is the drain tile stuff. But we definitely mix into the farm back and forth. Yeah, we stay pretty busy.
So we've actually never gotten into this because we're trades and construction, but I think it's relevant. I think a lot in a lot of rural areas, people are in the city and people are in densely populated areas. Um, they have paid, paid firefighters, paid whatever. I moved north to Maine. We have a lot of volunteer services. Same with more rural areas and what have you. Um, talk talk a little bit about how you got into the fire department and you know what it does for your community and why you did it.
The fire department side. So a lot of my friends, I had a lot of older friends with the dairy. We had a lot of high school kids that would help out, milk nights and different things. So it seemed like I kind of ended up hanging out with that little bit older crowd, 3, 4,
Yep.
5 years older than me. But that at the time, my brother was a firefighter. His buddies, 3, 4 of my buddies had joined. So at the time, like, yeah, why not? What? Uh, yeah, fighting fire's fun, right? So, so I'd say that's kind of why I got into it. Is the rest of the buddies were tight community. Again, our town is like 330 people. We actually our area is 100 square miles, and in those 100 square miles, there's about 500 residents. So that kind of tells you the size we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So we get into a lot of agriculture equipment fires, grass fires, crop fires,
Yeah.
along with structure fires. Generally, usually 1 or 2 a year is about what we get
Yeah.
for
We get chimney
structures.
fires up near us.
So I've been on plenty of them, but there's getting to be less and less wood burn in our area. I haven't dealt with a chimney fire for about 5 years now.
Wow.
But we did just last Friday. We had the neighboring town 7 miles away had an elevator fire. So we had 10 different departments on that. Um, um, Month ago we had a house fire with another neighboring town, and then our towns were built by the railroad, so all of our towns are about 7 miles apart, which is, I guess, they needed water about every 7 miles. So
Okay.
they dropped a water tower in a town, went 7 miles, dropped a water tower in town. So our towns are all spaced about 7 miles apart around here,
Okay.
and they're all that 3, 4, 500. Alexandria's 20 miles from us, so that's the lakes area.
Yep.
So there's about, I think the town itself is like 18,000 people, but it probably sleeps 40,000, like in the summer in the lakes area.
Okay.
So they've got a pretty big. They're still volunteer. Their fire chief is full time, but so they have a big aerial. So we'll bring them in when we need them. We had a church fire last year. We brought them in for. They were at this fire in Hoffman, the neighboring town, for the elevator. So we all work well together, and it's all volunteer around here.
Yeah, it was interesting because actually the two largest fires we've had recently were at meat cutting facilities. So
Yep.
we actually had the main, I forget who, it's not USDA, but essentially whoever's in charge of the butchers around here essentially said that um we're gonna have a hard time processing everybody's animals in Maine because we've had two massive facilities burned down. So they actually called on the deer processors who usually operate like under a different spectrum, but they're suited to be able to process meat, and so they called on them recently. And but yeah, I mean, we're all, to be honest with you, we've had the fire department up here checking our barn. We have a large uh, 20 stall barn, and another one attached to the house. And I mean, those are the most vulnerable, to be honest with you. It's we had our ranger caught on fire because it had some leaves in it. It was in the barn. Quick action from my wife, she put it out. And then I had to deal with all the wiring harnesses and shit that were burnt. But it's amazing how quickly you can get into a structure fire,
Right.
especially in a lot of these facilities.
Uh,
Um,
the old like an old dry barn like that.
yeah,
We've 10, 12 minutes. That barn can be fully engulfed and down. And especially in a rural area, a lot of those don't get called in until it's pretty well fully engulfed. and you're sitting 15 minutes away, like, yeah, you got a real good chance. You're pretty much there to protect the surroundings at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But um, but yeah, no. So on the apartment, yeah, I joined when I was 19. I was training officer. I was probably training officer maybe 16 years now,
Hmm.
and then last year I moved to assistant chief. So I've been an
Wow.
officer.
Congratulations.
So of the 20 years I've been there, I think I've been an officer for probably at least 14 years, anyways. I guess I'm not exactly sure on the dates, but 20. I think there's 22 guys on the department now. Our full roster is 28 guys on it, and yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of one of those things. Um, Most all my close buddies are on the department, and it's just kind of a thing we do, I guess.
So you were talking about
Mm.
grain earlier. Do you guys have like grain fires? I mean, I've heard that they're super volatile. Fine particles. They're flammable, and you could have, I mean, close to explosions, like huge infernos. Do you guys deal with that recently, or do you guys deal with that in any way, shape, or form, or trained, or what have you?
Are you talking like stored grain or like a field of grain?
Stored grain, actually.
So that's what we had on Friday was a grain elevator and
Oh, that
uh
was a grain. I was
well so,
figuring like,
yeah,
I
no, so a grain like the big old wood house grain
was like,
elevator
why do
next to
they
the
have
track.
10 departments
Yes.
for a regular?
Yeah. So and actually they got that knocked down really quick, and
Wow.
everyone did a phenomenal job. But they haven't come out with reports yet what happened there, but grain dust is explosive. It you know how it works. Everything has to be you got right oxygen, the right amount of fuels, ignition source. But typically, a lot of times, what'll happen is something will be burning, and you'll have a little explosion, or a little puff, or a little bang, and it rattles all the dust off of everything, and then that
Yep.
puts all that dust suspension, and then you'll have a big old bang. I'm quite certain that's what happened here because there was an explosion. It shook the town, and there was tin and wood and debris uh, spread at least a quarter block, if not a half a block. Glass that blew the windows out, and that was in the scale house part of the elevator. So they actually got it out. The outside of the old big wood house structure, that had just
Yep.
started to burn on the outside, and they got stopped at that point. Because if
So how do you protect against this? I mean, it seems like it's, I don't want to say it's like the cost of doing business or necessarily the risk you have to take, but it's like, I mean, it's pretty substantial. I mean, we've seen fertilizer fires. We've seen
yeah.
we've seen a lot of facilities recently, at least since I've started paying attention, whether it's ag, whether it's livestock or what have you, that we've had some pretty big issues. And I mean, how do we mitigate these problems?
Well, the as far as like in a grain elevator situation like that, these old wood houses were built in, God, I don't know, the 60s, 50s, 60s, so they've been around a
Yeah.
long time. A lot of lumber in there. They're all cribbed because a lot of them they're actual bins inside of those. So it's all like
Hmm.
2x6 cribbing or 2x8 cribbing through the whole thing. So it's a ton of wood in there. And and I'd say things have actually gotten better. I mean, our electrical components are all centrifugally safe, so they're either um, uh, protected from giving off little sparks, things like that. They got to be in sealed cases. Our
Yeah.
electrodes got to be in, good electrical boxes, compared to what they used to deal with before in the electrical, side of things. A lot of it's just cleanliness, keeping that 3 inches of dust off the walls. So when you have a little something, you don't have something, turn into more. Um, uh, but yeah, I mean things are definitely gonna happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because again, I can't iterate it enough. I mean, our electrician came in to do a little bit of work, and he said, our barn was built, I don't know, early 2000s, and so it's all the electrical is sealed PVC versus like Romex or what have you, and he goes, dude, your stuff is so like bomb proof. It's insane. And until you actually just said that, it makes a lot of sense. Why? I mean, we have our hayloft. It has over 1,000 bales of hay. Shavings within. I mean, it's just one cigarette butt away from being a huge issue.
Right.
So
Yep. And then I'd say as far as grain storage and things like that, more of the safety is the equipment they're working around. They're working around augers, these bin sweeps in there, loose
yeah,
clothing, and then the next other big thing is grain entrapment, where guys are inside a grain bin and get pulled down and buried, avalanched. We've actually worked. So Zach Johnson, Millennial Farmer, and I,
yep.
good buddies. We do the podcast Off the Husk. So he's ran a couple fundraisers doing grain bin rescue and donating out to departments. And God, I don't know if I want to say the dollar amounts that we've given away or he's given away through that, but I believe it was like 60,000 the first time that he gave away, and then in the second time I think was like 50,000. So he's over 100,000 donating to fire departments for grain bin rescue tubes, training, different things. If you go to one of his YouTube channels, he came with us, our department, to a training facility, and we did a grain bin rescue training. He made a YouTube of it so people kind of see what that looks like and some of the different equipment we use. Yeah, that's
All
pretty
right. Well, it's on topic, but probably very I don't know, very rare for the people that are listening. But how do you protect yourself if you did fall in from a grain asphyxiation? I guess you would put it that way.
So if you were in that position, you were on your own
Yeah.
and you got pulled in, you gotta keep swimming, gotta keep climbing. But eventually it'll pull you down to where you'll get locked up and you're just not moving. You are 100% at the mercy of everybody else around you. And a lot of these farmers work by themselves, do dumb things, climb in a bin by themselves. Nobody knows they're there. An hour later, someone's like, "Hey, what happened to so and so?" And it gets to be too late. But it's really when you're in there, that grain kind of going down and funneling down, and you can just kind of keep walking up and keep, obviously you shouldn't be in there in those situations. But if you get in those cases, the other probably more than that is guys will get spoilage on their bins and they'll get a crust over the top of it, and they will go in and they'll start their auger, and some grain will empty out underneath of it, and then something will go on and, hey, I should go in that bin and see what's going on. They look in there and everything looks normal, but there's actually a crust over the top of this bin and a cavity in there. They walk out there, don't realize that crust is there.
Oh.
So you fall in, and then that grain, it's just kind of caused like an avalanche. Once it starts going, it just keeps flowing. And, so probably just as many of the accidents happen because of something like that, as far as being in there when it's just running and not being able to stay on top of it.
So is because for me, machinery, person in a confined space, like that's just a no in general. But not understanding anything, like would a harness in this situation help? Would
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have a harness on, you have a tether line. You can only go so far. I mean, obviously you have that line too long, you're still going to get pulled over, they're going to be able to follow the line to you, but you're still going to be dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, a harness, a rope, if you got to go in a bin, somebody on the outside of that bin looking in from that manhole, so there's always a line of sight to everybody, a lot of things like that.
Yeah. Cool. So, I mean, we've touched everything from dairy to drainage to structure fires and the dangers of having agricultural facilities and
Chickens.
obviously, yeah, we've touched on chickens as well. So with your work week completely wrapped up with everything, I'm sure there's not a little time for you to unwind. What do you do when you find a little bit of time do you go hunting, fishing? Like what's your release?
So recently hunting, just because my boys are 14, 11 and really kind of got
nice.
this year. So just recently back into hunting when I was a kid, did a lot of hunting. Other than that, in the winter is a lot of our downtime. A little bit of downhill skiing, snowmobiling, and then just hanging out with friends. I mean, hanging out, have a few beers, play some cards. Yeah, that's just kind of, I'd say, yeah, hanging out.
That's awesome. And it's kind of funny because we had talked about this a while ago. We wanted to get together to do the podcast, but this actually really came together because of Case Construction, Case Agriculture. We ran into each other again at Con Expo, and we were both working the case booth, and the Case family really brought us together, and that's been pretty awesome. But outside of that, do you have anything that you want to mention, to talk about? Where can they find you if they want to get into firefighting, chickens, drainage, whatever? Where can they find anything Randy?
So I guess I'll start in the fire department thing. So there's nationwide, there's a huge calling for volunteers. It's just people aren't doing things in their communities like we used to. And the volunteer fire service, it's easy sometimes to sit back and poke fun at the volunteer fire department. But if you're not out there joining them and helping them, you're not doing any good either. So get out, show up to a meeting. Everyone knows somebody that's on the fire department. Talk to them, figure out when their next meetings are, show up at a meeting and join, give it a try. I mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot of departments that have a full roster right now that are going to turn someone down. We've even show up for trainings, show up, talk to them, go hit a couple trainings, see if it looks like it's something for you or not. I guess that would be on the fire department side.
Yep.
My side, Instagram, TikTok, a little bit Facebook, just kind of what pushes from Instagram, but master_pipe_layer, Off the Husk podcast, Off the Husk with Millennial Farmer podcast. Yeah, I guess that kind of sums that up.
No, and that's cool. I really appreciate you being on. I'm glad we got to connect, and busy schedules, kids, you name it. It's tough to coordinate, but we did it, and it's been excellent. So thank you for being on the show.
Can I add one more yet, or are we done?
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
So I got my first pair of BRUNT boots 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
2 weeks ago, I think, right before Con Expo. So I hadn't really worn them yet. The last week and a half now, I've been wearing them. I have very, very picky feet. I have high arches. Yeah, I know. But and I've actually been in the shop pretty hard the last week and a half, and my feet feel phenomenal. Honestly, I'm a very picky guy. You're not telling me to say this. I just wanted to throw that out there. I love the boots, and I'll be doing some more of those.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And as a special thanks to our loyal listeners, we're giving $10 off your next purchase of $60 or more at BruntWorkwear.com. Use discount code BucketTalk10. That's BucketTalk10.